Good morning and welcome to the September 20th meeting of the Public Infrastructure Committee. My name is Tony Emerson. I get the honor of chairing the committee, and if the other member president would introduce himself.
Thank you, Chairman. Neil Dobler, District 7.
All right, and we have a lot of city staffs sitting around, as well as our new city manager. And is this your first committee meeting?
This is my first committee meeting.
All right, well, welcome.
Thanks.
Welcome. So our first item is to approve the minutes from our August 18th meeting.
So moved.
All right, I will second that. Moved and seconded. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay. That passes, and now we go on to a discussion of the process for development opportunity. Okay. Our development process. So, Mr. Finder, please take it away.
Good morning. Thank you. Have an opportunity here to highlight our our basic development review flow chart. Just kind of start a conversation here, and so we'll just walk through our process as we have it now, as in simple of terms as possible, and we'll see where we go. On the you have this handed out on the screen. Couple things here, I guess, to point out. First of all, there is what we call three phases of development. Planning phase is the first phase. Permits phase would be the second phase, and that's when plans are in for approval and review, and the building permit gets issued. And then there's the construction phase and another series of inspections that go along with that before the final certificate of occupancy is issued by the city. So that's what we're really trying to get to. We're trying to get from when someone has a light bulb moment and they come to staff and say, hey, I want to do X. How do I get from point A to point B? That's what this flow chart is supposed to hopefully capture. So in the planning phase, the very first place we start, where we start. Here, am I able to? I was going to say, is there a mouse I could? No, that's fine. Don't worry. I'll use my words. I'll use my big words. So start here on the far left side. You see the blue boxes. We start, and the blue represents a multi-department review team. So the blue is where we all come together. The very first thing is the pre-application meeting, where we have all of the disciplines represented, from engineering to utilities to fire, planning and development services. Those are going to be your main disciplines in the meeting. And we really try to identify, okay, you have the light bulb, what you want to do. Here are the issues that may apply and that you will want to address in your application, in your submittals to staff. And we identify which track it fits in, and that's the next blue boxes there. So we want to say, does it fit in track 1, which is, hey, this doesn't need any preliminary review or any further information. It can go straight to building permit, and you can submit, today. And those are normally those are going to be less substantial, minor type projects. But if you're building a new building or making a major addition, then you're probably going to fit into track 2, which is that building permit plus a site plan review. I think our site plan review triggers are 15,000 square foot additions, or 50% addition of the existing square footage, or a brand new freestanding building. So those are sort of the triggers that would, and there's some others in terms of site, making the site impervious, expanding parking could add to that list of when it's in track 2. But suffice to say, it's going to be the more substantial new construction or addition projects. It's not going to apply to anything where you're not disturbing the outside of the building. We don't do site plan reviews for renovations, rehabs of existing buildings that do not, again, disturb the outside footprint of the building. So that would be one of those ones where that could be, a rehab could be in track 1, for instance. potentially. The last track, we ask if it fits. So if it doesn't fit one of those two boxes, it's probably because it's on track 3, which is not only do you need a building permit and a site plan review, but you probably need some entitlement through zoning or plating that needs to be approved. It could also be in a historic district that needs Landmarks Commission approval. So that's when in track 3, those again will be the more lengthy of all of these tracks, because you do have to then drop down into, as you see, there's some green boxes that represents more the planning stage, planning review, where you will either need to go to a body for approval. It cannot be approved administratively. So that could be the Planning Commission, it could be the governing body, it could be the Landmarks Commission, maybe the Board of Zoning Appeals. So some body other than staff is down there in that green, drops down in that green section. And you can kind of see I don't know if I'll walk through all of this, but you can kind of see that once you're down in the green section, there is engagement with the public at that point. So you have neighborhood information meetings, you've got a public hearing. So you go through a public process. It's not staff. So it gets to the end of that green, and here, for instance, if it went to the governing body, you give approval for, say it's a rezoning, approval's done. Okay, now they have the entitlement, if you will, to then go back to track 1 or 2 and either get straight into building permit review, or more than likely they've already done a lot of work on the site plan at that point if they're going through a rezoning. So they may just jump into that site plan review, that green box, and head on through that. Let's just, I'll stop there and see if there's any questions so far before I kind of continue from that point.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a couple of quick questions. Can you quickly define the difference between a minor plat and going through, obviously, major plats when you have a big chunk of land and you have to do all the platting? What's a minor plat?
Sure, Councilman Dobler. Minor plat is anything with 5 or fewer lots, net new lots that are created, and does not involve dedication of a new street. We do not, that minor plats cover, and I have to stop there because we have plenty of plats that come in that need to dedicate more right-of-way for a street, but the street's there. That can still be a minor plat. So and minor plats are administratively approved. So they don't go through any of the green boxes down here, for instance. Go ahead.
Question there, the length of street or the width?
The width.
Okay.
The width, exactly.
If the street needs lengthened.
So if the street if the right-of-way isn't even there, then that's probably going to bump that up into a major plat, because you would have to accept the dedications as a public body. It's creating a brand new access that was never there. And that's that. So anything over 5 lots, brand new street dedication, those are 99% of the times that's why it would be a major plat. And that does go through the planning phase, those green boxes, through the public hearing stages. So I think does that help differentiate?
It does, thank you.
Okay. So between the blue and the yellow boxes there, you see, I'll stop real quick on the site plan review box. That's coming out of track 2. That is something that we think has actually helped quite a bit. What I saw in the past, what Director Copley probably has seen, is that people in the past, before we did that, would jump into a building permit submittal, and whether it was stormwater, traffic access, potential setback issues with their building, or landscape, or parking, something with the site was erroneous, incomplete, needed more information, and it made the and it forced an adjustment to where that building could be on the property, shifting things around, where the improvements, and so what we found is that's where a lot of snafus, big snafus would happen. We untangled that a few years ago to say, okay, before we can release this to the building permit stage, let's do a preliminary approval of your site plan. Let's make sure the building's in, you're not going to have to move the building around or move any of your improvements on the site around. That gives Braxton's team a chance to review stormwater, which was a it's not as new as it used to be, but was a pretty new development, and people were not used to it. So now I think we've got it to the point where it doesn't have to be perfect. We don't have to stamp every last detail on here. So we've been releasing them to go to building permit with a conditional site plan, basically. So they come in with their site plan. We see that, maybe you're going to need another 5 feet here. You need to show us some more calculations on the storm, but we need more detail. But it looks right. It looks like it's going to feel like there's not going to be any major changes. We don't have to move an access point. So things of that nature, we conditionally approve, and then they can submit for the permit. However, there's one other little caveat in there, as you see, before you get to those yellow boxes for the permit phase. There could be some state or federal approvals that are needed before the permit can even be accepted. Notice of intents, NOIs, are probably the biggest thing that we have to warn folks about, because those are out of our control. But we cannot proceed with the permit until we have state approval that they can start moving land around, basically, and disturbing land. And so that comes into play on some of those bigger projects. And there's a certain threshold. You may know it better than I do, in terms of when they need an NOI and when they don't.
It's 1 acre of land disturbance activity triggers the NOI.
Okay. So that'd be a bigger, on the bigger side of things. So we got the site plan review approved, or conditionally approved, and any comments then can be handled in those yellow boxes. They can submit for the permit. The plans get reviewed and approved. If there's a plat that needs to be recorded, that's the time. That's what that little, there's a little dotted connection between the last green box and the yellow box that shows you as a governing body may have approved a plat, or it needs to be recorded before we issue the permit. It doesn't have to be recorded before they can submit for the permit. It just needs to be recorded before the permit is issued. So that's why we have that connection. And then once the permit is approved, obviously it goes into a construction phase and released for the on-site trade and building inspections until we get it to the point of issuing a C of O, certificate of occupancy. So that kind of works you through the process. So I'd be happy to answer any questions or provide any more info.
Go ahead, Councilman.
Thank you, Chair. Bill, could you give us just a quick idea of time frame for maybe starting with track one? Mm-hmm. Obviously not the construction phase, but just to the point where permits issued. Great question. Once it's into that yellow box, into the permit phase, we are averaging right now for initial reviews 5 to 6 days of initial reviews on the staff side. Turn that around. Our goal is actually 10. I should say our cap is 10 days. So when we have a heavy workload, we'll tend to hit that. Lighter workloads, we're hitting half of that. And then that kicks back out to the applicant. Between the time we get the permit applied for and the time it is issued,
We are finding that it's about 70% in the applicant's court, about 30% in our court. There could be a series of back and forths, but that is generally, how fast that gets issued is generally how fast the applicant gets back to us. Because our initial review is the longest review that we take, so it's 5 to 6 days. It comes back in the second time. Let's just say typically, maybe we are waiting on that for 10 days to hear back or longer. They're all different, but that's generally, so you're on a rehab, you're less than, and this is calendar days, you're less than 3 weeks, for a rehab. For a new building that may have more reviews and comments, that could probably be more up to 42, I think that's about 6 weeks or so before it is approved. And then so that's our averages that we're seeing.
How about the site plan review part of it?
Site plan review is another 10-day cap, 10 business day cap on that to get that, our comments back on that. If the comments are minor to moderate in nature, then that's the time. It's 2 weeks. If there's things missing before we can give a conditional approval, then again, we would have to wait on the applicant to give those comments back to us, and then the second review is done much quicker. So we tell people expect on a good site plan review, you're looking at 2 weeks, maybe on an average, because there might be a thing here or there, 3 weeks. If it's more major than that, then it could be 4 weeks. So that's kind of where our averages fall.
Great. Thank you, Chair.
A question, but I'm not sure I want to ask it. Something that always puzzled me, I guess, is the way it works is that you have, licensed professional engineers either designing the stuff or licensed architects with their stamp and their insurance and their errors and omissions. What's the duty of the city, I guess, to check their work? I mean, what does that give us? I mean, are we taking on any responsibility then if we're checking, asking for changes? Or I guess, where does their duty end and where does the city's begin?
I mean, I think that's I don't know if that's philosophical or more,
Almost a legal question, I guess.
Yeah, legally, but the intent is that when it comes to us, when this information comes to us, so we can trust it, it's bona fide, it's supposed to follow our standards. It does. They don't always do that. The calculations may be right, but maybe the way the calculation was done, that's something that staff would review. Maybe they did not add up the quantity enough. Not saying their math is wrong, but the input that went into it we may differ on what that input would be. So I think it's certainly it varies case to case, but I would say that generally it also doesn't. Their stamp doesn't cover incompleteness. So there may be 5 things that we're looking for, and they've submitted 4 of those.
Okay.
So their stamp doesn't carry, a grace period to waive that 5th one. We still have to have that 5th piece of information. So I would say those are really where the staff review comes into play more than the work of the engineer or the design professional.
I guess a follow-up, and maybe this is a question for Amanda, but does the city's review and acceptance of things, does that put liability on the city? Or is it?
No, generally that would fall under the Torts Claims Act unless you could prove intentional negligence or that it wasn't a discretionary function of government.
Okay, okay. You have a question?
Yeah, let me follow up on that just a little bit. I mean, you're really saying the duty of the city is to make sure that the design follows the applicable building code, correct?
Yeah, yes, we have, you all have passed a code.
Right.
Whether it's zoning or building or whatever. And so staff is looking at those codes to see have they met those codes. That's not what that stamp is for. So that's, because again, they're working in all different locations and they have various regulations. We may have opted out of some things, we may have added some things. So we're trying to help them get to the local compliance, not this was engineered correctly compliance.
I think, thanks.
Oh. That's, yeah, that's all I had. And maybe this is for Mr. Copley. Is the runoff, I know, Mr. Finders, you said that's a relatively new thing we're doing now. Is that part of the site plan review?
Generally, that's going to be triggered at a site plan review, and that's one of the very first things that we do. Our goal is to turn any site plan review for stormwater within a week,
Okay.
right? And so we're looking at quantity and quality depending on the amount of additional impervious surface that they're adding.
Okay.
Question?
Sure, go ahead.
Thank you. Braxton, I've had a couple of developers mention that I think the city used to look at detention as a method of making sure that the flow downstream equaled the pre-development flow from upstream. And now we're apparently requiring the total flow to equal what was the pre-development total flow. Could you talk a little bit about that?
Certainly. So what we're talking about is quantity, and as you've stated very eloquently, what the standard historically has been, you're limiting your post-developed flow to the amount of flow pre-development. Mm-hmm. There are 2 or 3 sub-basins within the city of Topeka that are very sensitive to the volume of flow. So it's not just the peak flow, it's not just the timing, it is actually the total volume of water. And in those 2 or 3 basins, we do require 100% retention, so we do not want to add additional flow. But that is by far the minority of basins. The other approximately 20 just require the post to match the pre. But Collie Creek is a very good example. Collie Creek is extremely sensitive basin. You've got a number of homeowners that live along the creek. Adding additional volume to that could flood their houses. North Topeka is another area that is extremely sensitive to the amount of volume. And you guys have seen it when we have those really wet years like 2017. Large portions of North Topeka are basically underwater. So those are examples of those basins that are volume sensitive, not just peak sensitive.
So thinking about Collie Creek, for instance, since that's in my district, does that preclude any future development?
I wouldn't say that it precludes it. It will make it more challenging in terms of the amount of land or the amount of underground storage that they will need to be able to develop.
Because there is you either have detention or retention, and retention requires the ability for the water to percolate into the
Correct.
Subsurface, which is virtually impossible in the Collie
Clay,
Creek area.
yeah.
Correct, because it's a very heavy clay soil, so you get a really low infiltration rate.
So then the only option's evaporation?
Correct.
Okay, I think that's probably something I would like to spend just a little bit more time, instead of putting you on the spot, spend a little bit more time discussing maybe in a future future meeting, I guess I don't really see how we can just totally tell the landowners in that area that they can no longer develop because they can't send any more volume of water downstream. So we'll look into that a little bit more. Thank you.
And Mr. Copley, you said there's a third area. You said Collie Creek, North Topeka Basin. There's a third.
I don't know that off the top of my
Okay,
head.
no
I
problem.
will email that to you.
Okay. No problem. Thank you. That's all the questions I had at this time. Just to give everyone, I guess, a little look ahead, this is something we'd like to talk about at every meeting, for here, at least through the end of the year, and maybe if several of us are still on the committee next year, because this is super important, and staff does a great job, but there's always a lot of friction in this because, developers, time is literally money for them, and frustration as well. And like I said, I know staff does a good job, but it's a tough thing, but we will get through it. So if nothing else, we'll move on to discussion of the next thing for developers, which is the Rural Housing Incentive District. And I believe Ms. Stanley
Okay.
can present.
Thank you, Chairman. So today in front of you, you have a sample RHID policy. So brief summary, in case you don't remember, a month ago, time goes real fast, and you've been real busy. Rural housing incentive districts are something that have been around for a long time in Kansas law, but not for the city of Topeka. So the city of Topeka was recently added into the statute and went into effect July 1st. So what the Rural Housing Incentive District does in basic terms is it's a TIF for housing. So it allows you to set a base year and then use the tax increment increases from those property taxes to help fund infrastructure. There's lots of cities in our state that have used them. I think the most prolific has probably been Dodge City. They did their first one in 2009. They've since then had 12 developed districts with over 300 units put in under the RHID program. So what you have in front of you is not a perfect policy. We talk about design build a lot. This is design draft because of the interest that we've been receiving. And since RHIDs are definitely a policy choice for the council, if you want to fund development using an RHID, or if you want to use it via special assessment districts or both special improvement districts, you could layer them. So our goal today was to get an initial draft of a policy out to the public in this forum. Now it's a public document, so that you can review it over the next couple weeks. Developers can review it. You can send input and feedback, say what you like, what you don't like, to allow us to draft the best possible policy for the city of Topeka. In drafting this policy, we did look extensively at other city and Kansas's policies, such as Dodge City, Hayes, Emporia, Ottawa, ones that have used RHIDs and have had the opportunity to tinker with it a little and see what works and what doesn't work. A lot of it is very much drafted similar to our TIF policy, with Finance Committee being able to look at it using the but-for test to make sure that the development will pay for itself using these kind of policies. And then we also have several drafting questions in there that we don't have answers yet. As city staff, we continue to investigate trying to figure out the best answer and would love input on some of those, such as, does it make sense to be able to stack a special improvement district on top of an RHD depending on the project? One of the things that we have done that is unique compared to other cities is we used our housing study to look at what our housing study calls for units and say that our priority is going to be to meet that. And Mr. Feinder is here today and he can talk all about the housing study. It is 100 pages of fun to read. If you want to go read it, it's on our website. It's available for any citizen to go look at the housing study, and it breaks down. And Mr. Feinder's happy to answer any questions, and I'm happy to answer any initial questions you have on the incentive draft. Again, like I said, our goal today is to get it out there so that the public can start reviewing it and you guys can give input and see what you like or what you don't like.
Wow, okay, that was a quick overview.
I can go in more depth too.
Any questions, Mr. Doble?
I do, and I'm not sure I fully formulated this question, but under principles there on the first page, we're talking about, housing study identifies 500 units a year. We're meeting maybe 200 units, and I think is that over like a 5-year
Correct.
average kind of
Yep.
thing. So there's a deficit of 300 units. incentive. I guess my question is, the breakdown of affordable units, workforce, market rate, is that determined by the current need? And I guess I'm thinking, as we look at the trickle effect, when somebody's able to afford a bigger house, they buy it and move up, and that allows people that are in smaller houses to move up. I mean, is that encompassed in this breakdown of need?
Councilman Nobler, it is a snapshot in time.
Okay.
So it is not going to predict if we do get a bunch of higher-end housing, it won't be able to measure the trickle effect, or these numbers don't measure that. It's a
where we're at
snapshot of
right
today.
now. Okay, that's what I need.
Good.
Thank you. That's all I have.
Yeah, I mean, we talked about this quite a bit yesterday, and I don't know any questions I have at this point. I mean, obviously a lot to see, or a lot to read here and kind of digest. Could I ask, maybe you're already going to do this, send this document also to the rest of the governing body?
I'm happy to do that if you would like it to go to the governing body as a whole, so they can also provide input for your committee to consider.
Yeah, I mean, I think that'd be great. I mean, this is, this is not something just, I think that we need to, I think we need to get everyone's opinions on this, because this is potentially a big deal to really kind of move the needle for development in Topeka. Anything else on this item? Yeah, please, Mr. Councilman Dover. And you might want to,
Yeah. Mic check? Are you-
Yes, yeah.
Are you, Councilwoman
Sylvia
Ortiz?
was on.
Yeah.
Yes.
And this is the first time I've seen it, so I'm just kind of glancing through quickly. I notice we have reference to the city's financial advisor who's going to looks like maybe oversee this process. Do we not have the expertise in-house to oversee this process?
To oversee the process in-house, yes, we do have the expertise to oversee it. Our TIF policy does have our financial advisor run our but-for tests, those kind of things. And so absolutely, I think the overseeing of it could be in-house as long as we can consult with our financial advisor on the but-for tests and running the numbers to make sure that they work internally.
Yeah, I think that would be preferable in my view. It seems like our financial advisor, and I understand why, but it seems like in the past when we've talked TIF districts and other things, the first answer is no, and I think that's because our financial advisor is concerned about a lot more things than perhaps the increasing the number of houses and ability to add people to the community. So I'd like to see us keep as much of that in-house, develop that expertise if this becomes a tool that we're going to use frequently, and not depend on outside financial advisors. Thanks.
Thank you, Councilman. I do not have any other questions, and I believe, are there any other items that staff would like to present or ask about?
I would just say if anybody in the public has feedback, they can feel free to reach out to me directly, send me an email, give me a call. I am getting very familiar with talking RHIDs with people, so I'm happy to discuss things if they have questions.
And I guess on this, you said this is in the public record now, but is there a place, maybe on our website, we could put a link or something to this?
I'm sure our city manager will find one.
All right. Well, that would be great, unless anyone else has something. We are adjourned. Thanks,
Great.
everyone, for
Thank you.
coming.